Hello and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm your host, Lynnaire Johnston. We're going to be talking about networking today. We are delighted that you've taken time out of your busy day to join us. So please do say hello in the comments and tell us where you're from. We would like to just run through a bit of housekeeping before we get underway today. And the main thing to know is that please only trust links in the comments, either from myself or one of my wonderful hardworking team members, Cher Ferguson and Gillian Moore. Now, we invite you to add your questions and observations on the discussion into the chat so we can answer those at the end. Now, if this is your first time that you've joined one of our events, thank you. If you're not connected to me, please do reach out. I recently changed my follow button to connect to make that easier. My mission in life is to help unravel the mysteries of LinkedIn for those who want to use it to help them in their professional lives. If you're a solopreneur, business owner, or employee, LinkedIn can unlock opportunities. That's if you know how. To that end, we hold events weekly, post frequently, write books, and have a members site where I simplify LinkedIn so you can achieve your professional goals. You'll find that at linkability.biz. Please do pop over and take a look. Before we get underway today, I want to put our discussion into some context. The team and I began the year deciding to put more effort into our events because they're a popular way to get information across to those we want to help. We've ramped up our event frequency to weekly, and we've gone all out on co-collaboration. Now, if you've not heard this term before, co-collaboration is when you and those you collaborate with work to expand your influence into each other's networks. So how that works for events like this is not only do we post about our events and actively invite our connections to attend, but we like our guests to do the same. That way, both their connections and ours benefit from the widening network of attendees and post commenters. It gives our guests content to post about while showing them as someone worthy of being invited as a guest, as our guest today is. After the event, we send them the file so they can do what we do, repurpose the video or the transcript into an article, short clips or takeaways posts. In other words, both they and us benefit. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this is another form of networking, our topic today. We all know that LinkedIn is the world's biggest professional networking site with more than 1 billion members. That gives us access to way more people than we could ever get to know in several lifetimes. The opportunities that result, endless. But networking has changed. Prior to COVID, most of us mainly networked in person. In fact, we were only a week away from holding our third LinkedIn local event when lockdown hit. We then moved online. All of us moved online, didn't we, with our networking? We learned new skills very rapidly. We learned the dangers of being caught on Zoom with small children, animals running around in the background, and being caught in our pajamas. As we became more familiar with online networking, we became more aware of the differences. It took more time to establish rapport, for instance, when we didn't meet in person. And there were plenty of meeting no-shows. We've all been through those. Other traps for the unwary surfaced as we went along. But now we're back to meeting in person. But we're still also networking online, especially when the person's out of town or out of the country. It widens our worldview when we can do that and opens up a whole new range of possibilities. And today's event has come about from one such online outreach, but more on that later. Now we're going to bring our guest, Diane Darling, on to talk about networking, how it's evolved, what the new rules are, and what we can do on LinkedIn to advance our networking, especially now that LinkedIn has made it harder to reach out to new connections for many. But more on that a bit later too. Let's meet Diane Darling, all the way from Boston. Hello, Diane.
Hello, Lynnaire. It is such a delight to be here. I've listening to your accent, and I remember my wonderful trips to New Zealand many years ago when I was young in my 20s. It was a lovely visit.
We are very well known for our accents, and it's one of our defining features, for good or bad, Diane. So thank you. And thank you for being here today. Now, I would like you to spend just a couple of minutes telling us a bit about yourself, because I know that you are a best-selling author about networking, and I would like to hear about your books.
I'd be delighted, and thank you again for having me here. So I got started teaching networking when somebody said, "You're good at networking," and I was frankly a little insulted because I thought it was schmoozy and not real. You went to get something from me. You took somebody. It was all self-serving, and someone said, "No, you kind of do the good kind of networking," and I'm like, "So tell me more." And she said, well, you connect people when you hear someone's looking for an apartment and someone's, looking for an tenant, and you connect them. And I'm like, well, doesn't everybody help out people that way? And they said, no. I'm from a small town in Indiana. I spent many years living internationally. So I knew the importance of connecting people, and also making people feel included and people feeling welcomed when they were in, an unfamiliar spot. So I started doing these workshops on teaching people how to network. And, and I at one point someone says, what's your fee? And I'm like, you're going to pay me? And I thought, well, sure. So I did a few more programs, and then the Wall Street Journal came and covered one of them. And the article appeared, and McGraw-Hill called and said, we'd like for you to write a book. And I said, okay. And I'm like, oh, I could barely finish a 3-page paper in college. How in the heck am I going to write a book? And one of my crushing moments is that right when the book was done, I tried to get hold of my English teacher in high school, and she had just passed away 6 months before. Because I did a nice little shout out to her. And one of my favorite things was when she taught us about how we often use too many words. And her example was, he had a smile on his face, and she says, where else is it going to be? So thank you, Mrs. Peterson. He had a smile. That's all you needed. He had a nice smile.
Our English teachers are very important to us. So the book was well received.
Absolutely. One of the first phone calls I got, or messages, interestingly enough, was from a British Bobby, a policeman, who said, I'm using your book to help us solve crimes. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, because it's interesting how often we kind of work in our own departments, and then we realize maybe we should talk to somebody else in another department to see if they know these situations or if they have a possibility of a solution. I will say I'm at times a little bit like, okay, now you're teaching networking here in the United States. I should be teaching in the UK, but I'm very thrilled. Neil is his first name. I don't even remember his last name, but he was one of the first people to reach out to me, which was really wonderful. And one thing I did
helping fight crime.
I'm helping to fight crime. And one thing that was interesting too was when I interviewed people about their networking stories and I included them in the book, and I started saying, who do you think I should interview? And they kept introducing me to their network. And that was really an amazing experience. One of the more memorable ones was I interviewed a gentleman named Richard Saul Werman, and he created TED, the TED Talks. Oh. And a lot of people don't know that it stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And he said, come to my house in Newport, Rhode Island. And he was very intimidating. There was this huge Chinese horse statue, and you can't park next to the horse. I'm like, that's okay. I don't want to park near the horse. I don't want to touch that thing. So some wonderful memories of working on it. I locked myself in a cabin for a couple of weeks because I was behind on my deadline, and I did no internet. I just had Post-it notes on the windows and wrote the book.
I think when you write a book, Diane, the only thing to do is to make sure you sit down and do it. The hardest thing about writing a book is getting your derriere onto the seat and opening your computer, because once you are underway, I find that the words just flow. But if you don't actually sit down and write, then it's simply not going to happen. So I'm really pleased to hear about the book, because I think that having a book to your name is something that is really important for many people, many business people. But we're not here to discuss books today. We're here to talk about networking. And so where I want to start with that is by talking about the differences in-person networking between pre-COVID and post-COVID. So before COVID, I was a keen in-person networker. For a long time, I was a member of BNI. So that meant I went to weekly networking events, often held events, hosted events in the evenings as well, that were networking, where people could come along and get to know other people outside their immediate circle. And they were always really popular. It was always lots of fun to meet new people, and I really enjoyed that. But then, of course, COVID hit. All of that stopped very abruptly. But now we're back networking again in person. Now, my own situation has changed, and so I'm not doing as much of that as I was prior to COVID. And so I'm just wondering what's happened in terms of trends. Has COVID affected the way that we are networking in person now, or is it pretty much just business as usual?
No, I think it's very different. I think one of the things that meeting planners are telling me is it's hard to get people to come to events. It has to be a really worthwhile reason to put on your shoes. I mean, people don't want to have to get out of their yoga pants and put on shoes and any of that sort of stuff. I mean, fair enough. It's, for us, it's winter, so it's chilly, but it's really, I mean, there's something tomorrow night and I'm like, do I really want to go? I mean, I was like, can this be a no lipstick day? I mean, you never thought about that before. You just knew you had to get up, you had your routine, you had to get out of the house, that whole sort of a thing. So meeting planners are telling me that it's hard and it has to be a very worthwhile reason. And so I have something called the weather report, which is whether or not you go.
Okay.
And it's a fun chart on a schematic. And if anybody wants to follow me on LinkedIn, please feel free. And then I'll post it and I'll add it to our chat that we have going on here. But part of it is, who invited you? How long? Is there any structured networking? I test as an introvert, but I'm a friendly introvert. So I freak people out. They don't quite know what to do with me. So I'm very friendly, but at the end of that, I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted. So for me, it's got to be a really worthwhile experience. I got invited to an event next week, very worthy event about the climate. And I called the woman who, invited me, and I said, is there any way I can even give a 5 or 10-minute talk about how to network back at events now? Because I wanted a job. I don't want to be an unemployed networker at those events. I just don't want to walk around and try and pretend it's a 7th grade dance and you're trying to figure out who to talk to. It just, it makes me uncomfortable. So the in-person events, I think, I'm a former meeting planner and I obviously attend a lot of events. People have to really feel like it's worth their time. They've learned to be, they've got their setups at home. They may not be perfect. They can tuck the kids in bed. They can, have the Zoom on and have it on silent and go off camera and then back on and yell at their kids or, stir the pot of pasta and, all that sort of stuff, throw the laundry in. I think there's just a lot of things going on. So I think the quality of events is going up because you're not going to kind of do those drive-by, I'll just drop in and, free beer and, blah, blah, blah.
So what makes a good event? What gets people out of their yoga pants, putting their shoes on and heading out of the house?
So I think it needs to have some structure, and I think it does need to have some, it's not good if you have people just walk into a room and expect them to kind of go talk to each other. One time I was volunteering at a fundraiser, and someone said, Diane, will you please go into the VIP room? They're all just in the corners and they're not talking to each other. And I said, okay. And so I go to this man and I said, tell me, is my 2 magic words, tell me your connection to this organization? And he said, I've done this and this. And, and I said, well, when you're not at these events, what do? He said, I'm a structural engineer. I said, oh my gosh, I just read the coolest article in the New Yorker about the structural engineer. He was the designer of the Citibank building in New York, and there was a flaw in the design, and he decided to tell on himself, which was very ethical of him to do, because if the winds had gone this way and this way, the whole building would have gone down. They had a Red Cross plan in case this happened. Huge integrity for that man. And he said, do you remember his name? And I said, yeah, something French, Le Messier. He said, it was me.
Wow.
I had absolute chills. And it's an amazing case study of ethics and his decision. And he got a call from a student who said, I think there's a flaw in your building. And he said, oh, no, there's not. It's fine. And then, the student called back and says, I really think this could be dangerous. And then he got spooked. But it's one of the most amazing moments when I just simply walked up to somebody and said, tell me.
Tell me. So 2 words to start any conversation are tell me. And an open question. I think it's very easy to ask yes or no response questions. And so if a question is open.
Yeah. And when I see people on their phones, I walk up to them and I'm like, what is your favorite app? You look like you like that little device. And they sort of, kind of chuckle. I'm like, seriously, what's your favorite app? Let's talk phones. I love my apps. And I start, this is, I said, okay, let's put it away and let's have a nice conversation. So
I think building rapport with people when you're meeting them in person is easier than it is when you're doing it online, because you get more visual cues about a person. So as an example, you and I can only see the top halves of ourselves here. We could be dressed in clown costumes underneath the table. No clown costume for you, clearly, but no shoes either, I notice. And on top, we've got all of this kind of businessy stuff going on. And so we're kind of almost like chameleons in a way, aren't we? But I think you get visual cues when you're meeting somebody in person, not only how they're dressed, but how they speak, their hand gestures, their mannerisms, all of that kind of thing. And I'm wondering how much more difficult it is to get to know people online, because you don't have those kind of body language and visual cues with people anymore. Well, not the same number, I'm saying, really.
No, yeah. So I will confess, from my perspective, I don't feel like one is better than the other. They're different. They're simply very different. And so I am going to be in Chicago in April for a speaking gig. And then I was randomly looking at a map when you don't do that stuff anymore. And because I was thinking about visiting a second cousin who we met through ancestry. I didn't even know our grandparents had a double wedding. And, and I just randomly was one day in the middle of COVID, started going through ancestry, and I wrote the person and he said, well, yeah, our grandparents had a double wedding. I'm like, I had no idea. So when I looked at that, well, Detroit isn't that far. It's 4 hours away. And I thought, you know what? In the middle of COVID, there was a group of us that got up at 6:30 in the morning during the lockdown. And we would say, what are we going to commit to that day? We were accountability buddies. And we did that. I've never met any of them. If any of them called me and said, I'm going into surgery and I need someone to be there with me, I would be on a plane. And so when I saw the difference in this, I thought, you know what? Let me see if the weekend after Chicago, I can visit them. We're now planning a party and a half. We've never met each other. So I think it's just different on how we connect online. And there will be a lot of people who I have rapport with, virtually. There's one of my team members. He's in the UK right now. He's in the hospital. I'm ready to fly over because it's a significant illness, and I'm just getting really worried. So, in October, I had the chance to go visit one of my other team members, and she's in Colombia, South America. And, and it was almost weird to be with her because we were so used to virtual, and there was really, frankly, no difference. So I think it's just, it's a different way of meeting people. I think you do get body language. There's one person and he loves it because every time he meets somebody in person, they're like, "You're taller than I thought you were going to be." And he came to me, "Do I have a short personality?" I'm like, "No, it's okay."
I love that. I had the great good fortune last year to meet 3 people in person that I'd only ever communicated with online because they visited New Zealand. Now, they didn't come to my city, so I had to get in my car and drive for a few hours each way in order to be able to meet them. But where I live, there's the biggest kind of resort, if you like, in our island. So New Zealand's made up of 2 islands. I'm at the bottom of the main one, or we like to think it's the main one. And there's a big ski resort not far away. So I got in my car and went to meet these people. Honestly, Diane, it was like just having a conversation with them on Zoom. I felt that we'd known each other for years, because in some cases we had known each other for years, but just not personal sense. And it really was easy to overcome any barriers, because when you meet somebody for the first time, there is often that, oh my goodness, what are they going to think about me, and all that kind of stuff. Well, a lot of that is gone because they already know a bit about you. You've already established rapport, you've already got something in common, and the fact that you've made an effort to go and see them, you've got getting on a plane, I was getting in my car, I think really does make a difference. And I think, can build relationships that might start out online on LinkedIn, and then move offline, should people decide they want to tick an item off their bucket list and come and visit New Zealand, which an enormous number of people seem to want to do. So, which is very fortunate for me. All right, so let's take the conversation online, and why don't you share with us the story about how this event came about, in the sense that how did we put this together on the back of what exactly happened?
Sure. What happened was that I've tried this a little bit for the last year or two, but I send people an anniversary email saying it's our LinkedIn anniversary, and it's the date that we connect with people. So when you look at your LinkedIn connections and you go to the contact info, there'll be, sometimes people have their emails available, phone numbers. It's up to them what they share, but there's a connection date. And when you download your LinkedIn into a spreadsheet, you can use Google Sheets, Excel, whatever else it is. You can use a CRM or a database, but you can just use just a simple spreadsheet. And so I send people an email on that anniversary date. And so it's automated and not. I mean, I don't write every single email separately, but what I do is I have a mail merge. So it says, "Hello, Lynnaire, happy anniversary." I don't put the date because it's the date that it is. If somebody goes and checks it, it's accurate. Sometimes it may be off by a day or something like that, if, whatever else. And a lot of people don't even know that this exists. So you received my LinkedIn anniversary message, and I have to say this has been so remarkable because I've gotten some significant business from this, and I've gotten so many people who've said, "Wow, how fun." And a man wrote me the other day, and he said, "How refreshing to get just a nice email." And he says, clearly it's not, just, specifically written from you. But he said, "I'm not really doing a lot of LinkedIn. I just went and got my master's a year or 2 ago. My wife died, a few years ago after 83 years of marriage." And I'm reading and I'm like, wait a minute, 83 years of marriage? How old are you? They got married when she was 17 and he was 19. The man's 98 years old, and he just got his master's 2 years ago.
There's hope for all of us.
I'm like, you inspired me. And I could honestly say, I looked, and the other thing I do on this spreadsheet is I put where we meet. And so I invite all of you to not only just have the date, but where did we meet? I think you and I met through Brenda, if I remember correctly, Brenda Meller. And so part of it is that, those are just really nice, warm feelings about how you can reconnect with somebody and say hi and that type of a thing. So it's just so that's how we met. And then you wrote me and said, how about we do a LinkedIn Live? And we figured out the time zone, and it's 7 p.m. my time, and I think early in the morning yours. And so life is good.
And here we are. So
we are.
I mean, I just love that as a way of, first of all, reconnecting with people, because you and I hadn't been in contact for a while. We'd been connected for a while, but certainly not in contact in recent times. And I just loved the simplicity of it, and also the point of difference, because it's very easy to send somebody happy birthday message, and everybody, well, a lot of people do that. I don't do that. Because I don't really want to be reminded, thanks. So I don't like receiving them particularly. So I don't send them. And then there are the kind of messages you can send people on their work anniversaries, which is, again, I think that can be a bit variable, a bit hit and miss, in terms of whether they actually put the job up on the dates, or even the dates are accurate, and it's very kind of general. And of course, the other thing is, there is a third thing that you can send an anniversary for, education, when somebody has come to finish their education and they put a date up for that too. So there are different things that you can actually connect to or reconnect with people on. But I like this one because it's different, right? Now, nobody expects this. And also you took it off LinkedIn. And that is one of the major kind of objectives for any communication or relationship on LinkedIn, is to take the conversation off LinkedIn. And part of that is because it's that bit of building trust, but it's also then you can't, apart from your connections, you can't download much data from LinkedIn. You can't, for example, download the subscribers to your newsletter and pop them into your CRM system. And so it's really ideal, I think, for you to choose something that's a little bit different and to approach people in a different way. Now, there is a bit of work because you've got to find those email addresses, and they may not have their email addresses publicly on LinkedIn. But if that's the case, I'm full of solutions, me. If that is the case, then you could send them a LinkedIn message. Now, you can't automate that, and you can't use your mail merge for that, of course. But imagine if somebody was to receive a voice message from you saying, hey, a year ago, you and I connected here on LinkedIn, which they can go away and check. You and I connected here on LinkedIn, but we've not been in touch much since. How have you been since COVID? What are you doing in your business? And tell me, those two magic words. And they will work as well on LinkedIn, I think, as they do when you are face to face with somebody. Tell me how it's been, what it is, whatever. And I just loved the fact it was a point of difference. It did help that your email was written really nicely. It wasn't a salesy, it wasn't promotional, it wasn't anything more than just, hey, we're sharing an anniversary when you and I connected on LinkedIn. How cool is that? And away you go. So I think that the fact that that is different is what made it stand out for me, because it's such an easy thing for people to do, and they don't know it can easily be done.
No, thank you. And I think to your point, it's different. And one thing for me that was important was that at least once a year I could. So the hope is that I started it, and I think at some point in the fall. I tried it a year or two ago, and I just didn't keep up. And as for people like you and me, as our LinkedIns get big, it's harder for us to be in touch with people. And the other day, one person came up, and I thought, wait a minute, he and I were first connected. And I wanted to introduce him to somebody. And so I told the person, let me just check in. And so I called this person, and I had said, I want to introduce you to somebody. Here's the reason why. Here's the connection. He says, happy to. He took my phone call right away. Diane, nice to talk to you. And I said, okay, weird question. We used to be first connected on LinkedIn. Have I done anything to offend you? And he said, no, he hit the 30,000 person limit. And so he told his assistant to, there were some countries he knew he would never do business with, take people off of that. And he said, then I gave them some titles, or if they didn't have these types of titles. And I said, maybe not a very good idea, because you lost me. He said, reinvite me. I said, of course I'll reinvite you.
I don't think too many people suffer from the problem of reaching that limit. It's a good problem to have.
Well, and I didn't say anything to him, but I'm like, why do you need 30,000 contacts? You don't need 30,000 contacts.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. But here's one thing that I will be interested in your opinion on. LinkedIn would prefer that we followed people rather than connected with people. And everything that they do is geared towards that. So, for example, until next month anyway, if you have creator mode turned on, then you have the follower button activated, and that's what people see. And people have to go through a few more hoops if they want to send you a message to connect to you. And so they are clearly making that more important in people's minds. Now, how do you think that's a good idea? I have an opinion on this, and I would be interested in your opinion, whether you think it's better to follow somebody on LinkedIn or to be connected.
Oh, I think that's a tricky one. I mean, when you follow, all you can hope is that at some point you'll see something in your news feed. And so, I think the follow is fine. I think the follow is a little bit of a vanity thing. I have 60,000 or 1 million followers. And particularly if it's a 30,000 limit on connections, I am so much more focused on quality. And to me, it's a quality game, not a numbers game. And, when people say to me, this night, he's a really super person, but, seriously, why do you need 30,000 connections? And I say in my workshops, that the way I know I'm really connected to somebody, one, will they take me to the airport? 2, will they help me move? And 3, will they loan me money? Those are the people who are really core in your life. And I think right now there's probably 0 on all of those. But, and right now I'm not moving, and I Uber to the airport, and, at the moment I'm okay with money. But, at the same point, I do think it's one thing that we really do need to say, and when this gentleman who was, 90 some years old, when I saw his note, I thought, who in the heck is that? And then when we wrote back and forth, I'm like, where have you been? You're fabulous. I would love to know you. So the other thing I will say about this LinkedIn, this anniversary thing, is I've gotten maybe 2 complaints. Take me off this list. And I'm like, happy to, is my attitude. Happy to. You'll never hear from me again. I don't disconnect with them on LinkedIn, but I put it as a do not mail. And there's a lot of people who I don't hear from, and so it has been a wonderful reuniting, though, of some people. And I will say that there's some very senior executives who've reached out to me that I don't know that I would have done the same to them.
Yes. So yes, I think it's interesting who comes out of the woodwork when you start to do that. When I say come out of the woodwork, I mean who responds to messages like that. And I think that there are a lot of options on LinkedIn that people aren't taking into account, like voice messages and video messages. When somebody connects with me, when they've asked to connect with me, and I sent them my thanks for reaching out message, I always follow up with a short video. Now, again, I don't make these individual to the people because I simply don't have the time and enough makeup. But I do, I've got one standard one that just lists some of my resources, but people really appreciate the fact that it is a video, because that is that one step further to just seeing a photo of somebody is actually hearing from them. And it might not be personalized, but they can hear your voice, can see your hands moving and all those things that really make a difference to people. And it's all about building trust. After all, that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to build relationships, develop trust, so that people, should they need our services, then get in contact and start to talk about that. And I think it's how we make people feel that's important. And so how we produce those messages, how we come across, how we present ourselves is hugely, hugely important. Now, we have a couple of questions, so I'm just going to put these onto the screen, if I may, because that way I might actually be able to see what they say. So, Sandra, it's lovely to see you. Sandra and I have been very good connections for some time. She lives in Sydney. So she's wanting to know if you send a, send a direct message and don't get a reply, How many times should you follow up without being annoying? Now, that's a very good question. What would you suggest around that, Diane?
Well, the other day somebody wrote that they were actually looking for an introduction to the CEO of Ancestry, and did anybody have them in their network? And I said, well, why do you want to be in touch with them? So I think one thing that I see is that we reach out to people, but we don't say why. And that why needs to be what's in it for the other person. The world's favorite radio station, remember, Lynette, WIIFM, what's in it for me?
Oh,
Back when
yes,
people listened to radios. So, you've got to really say, I'm reaching out to you because X, Y, and Z is going to benefit you. Then they will pay attention. If you don't do that, and in some cases, frankly, the timing is just off. I mean, if we didn't have this scheduled between, one person in the UK who's not well and my other person who's been in the hospital all day with her, her her toe broken, it's been a crazy day. And so, but I think, so did I ignore anything today? I might have. I may have. And, I'm very overwhelmed with email, which is why I do try and pay more attention on LinkedIn and ask people to at least start there and I asked them to put a note, I saw you on this show with Lynnaire type of a thing. So I think you've got to be very specific about it. And, no one's annoying if you're offering something that's of value. If you're trying to sell that, oh, I see, you're rich and famous. Of course, you want to buy another house. I'm a real estate person. I have to say, I did a presentation, and I live in Boston and Harvard is here. And I don't want to be name dropping Harvard, but it's here. It's a local school that we often have access to it. But I was asked to speak there. And I think I put a post on LinkedIn, and somebody, a mentor who cared about me very deeply, she said, Diane, it's a private event. You really shouldn't have posted that there. And it didn't occur to me, Lynnaire, that somebody would go to an event at Harvard if it was a private event. To me, was just kind of like, this is happening. It wasn't like, it didn't occur to me that I was violating anything. One, two, it didn't occur to me that anybody would show up with ill intention. If you were not a part of the Harvard alumni, why would you go? It just was, but she said, oh, you'd be surprised. Real estate brokers go, wealth managers go, this person goes. They're always trying to sell us stuff because we are an alum of a prestigious place.
Yes.
And it was a very important lesson for me to realize that, you and I are in some pretty amazing rooms, and we want to be sure we are respectful of those communities, and honor those communities.
Yes, it's very easy to not realize the ramifications, I think, of sharing some of the things that that people share with you that you decide you're going to do. So we've got a question from Antonia here, which looks like it might be interesting. With the thousands of connections we create online, you quickly forget why you connected. Now, you've already covered this, but do remind us, because I think that why you connected with someone in the first place is really important. And she's also asking about how we manage them, or might be the same question with the same answer, two questions with the same answer.
Yeah, so I would say, either do it on a Google or a Microsoft spreadsheet. I humbly would love, when Microsoft announced that they were buying LinkedIn, I'm still waiting for this marriage to happen. They've been engaged for all these years. I really want Microsoft to, really go in there and have a CRM within LinkedIn. To me, that's just, that you can do so much, but they don't want to annoy Salesforce, so they don't do this, from what I understand. But, so what I do, Antonio, is I download it to either a Microsoft or a Google, and I have a field called the Met Where, and then I have any specifics. So, and the Met Where, the source, if you will, is a drop down: LinkedIn, chamber member, and if it's a chamber group, I have that one as I think called civic or membership. And so that's a drop down. But then to the right, the next field is I can type it anywhere. So it's a member of this group, a member of that group, a member of this group. And then there's a notes area where I'll put a little bit of information there. The challenge is as this gets bigger, there's a young lady I coached yesterday, and she has about 600 people, and she's 23. She's very young. She's just getting started. I said, get this spreadsheet started now before, it's just absolutely overwhelming. And then as you add them and add them and add them, we have blizzards here in Boston, and, sometimes we have endless, I think, I don't know, 14 days of gray weather. So, at that point, I watched endless Ted Lasso to make myself smile, but I'll just work on my LinkedIn while I'm watching Ted Lasso and, and clean that up. So these are important systems. I've never done drugs, but I kind of feel like LinkedIn is my drug because you kind of can't stop.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Once you start going, and I do feel, particularly as I blame George Clooney on this actually, because he said that before you turn 50, you're like, yeah, I could probably live double my age, and he says then after you turn 50, you're like, I might not live double my age anymore. So now that I'm over 50, I'm like, I might not live until 110 or whatever this number is these days. And, and so I think it's important for you to really, really take care of this network. Is really cherish this. I welcome people in my network. Having said that, if I get one more invitation saying I'll teach you LinkedIn, I'll shoot the computer. I'll turn you into a 7-figure coach. I'm like, well, great. The reason you're going to do that is you're going to earn the 7 figures on the money of everybody you take.
Yeah. And certainly, I don't think those kind of messages are valuable, valid, or in any way useful for anybody. It would make sense. Now, Emo is asked about how you address people on LinkedIn with the mobile app to connect with them without personalized messages. This is a tricky one. I think they are making it easier now, but I'm not an app user, so this is not a question for me. I'm a desktop user. So
I do both. So I'm going to open up my LinkedIn here and see if I can do this. So when I go to somebody who I'm trying to invite, what you do, I believe, is you go to the right side of where the message is, and there'll be 3 dots. And it's hidden there where, and it's right there where you can do a customized invitation. And what I will tell you, Emo, what I do instead is I take the business cards, or I write down. I'm a big fan of little notebooks. I actually sometimes just do index cards, and I put those in my pocket with a pen. And then I'll have that. This will be my little thing for the night of just some index cards type of a thing. I have a whole stack of them in fun colors type of a thing, and I take them with me to an event with a pen. And then what I'll do is I jot down literally, invite Lynnaire, invite, Imo, invite those different people. And then I do business cards. And it's funny. I wrote an article actually on LinkedIn about this. I sleep with a stack of business cards next to my bed. And then I can wake up in the middle of the night and I can just scratch things. And in the morning, there's this little collection of all because I don't want to wake up and think I have to write it down or I'll forget. With an index card, I can just throw it on the floor and it sort of makes sense in the morning, but it helps me sleep.
I think having a system is a really good way to do that, but you've got to follow the system. And I'm really good at setting up systems and not quite so good at following them, because something else gets in the way. I get busy doing something else, something happens, and then it kind of gets dropped or lost. So I think that having the discipline to do a little every day on LinkedIn is one of the important things. Now, you and I both love LinkedIn. I'm obsessed. You're a huge fan. Diane. So between us, we probably spend quite a bit of time here. I don't do LinkedIn while I'm watching Ted Lasso, I admit that, but I will often be doing LinkedIn while I am listening, having got an audio event on in the other ear, something like that going on. But generally, I think that doing something with LinkedIn every day is really super important. Now, Sandra is asking again about, with another question, which is a really good one, about why people aren't using video and the video features to that I talked about earlier, which is one of the things that we do is send a video message. Why people aren't doing that more often? Do you get many of those? Are people using them, and why not? Why are people not really embracing that as such an easy way to reach out to people?
You know, I'll own my, it's either vanity or stupidity. I overthink what I look like right now. My hair is driving me crazy because the hair in my picture I like much better, and this all kind of curly. And you know, is anybody here really worried about my hair? No, you're worried about the information you're getting from me. We are so self-critical, and I will own this. And so I think we really also, I think we can thank YouTube for this, that YouTube let us be not perfect on video. You know, I mean, I'm a speaker, and when I was first starting my career, we were supposed to spend between $3,000 and $5,000 for a speaker reel, a video reel. You now can take your phone and say, "Hi, everybody, I'm doing that with, you know, Lynnaire," pop it up on video, and no one cares. I'll look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, the shadows here. And oh, I didn't realize this was there. Now you could see my pencils, and oh, here's my magnifying glass because I'm getting old. I mean, you know, our head goes down a black hole. And so I think we want to put our best face forward, literally. And there's also enough people who are young and smart and make it look super easy. And you go look at their videos and they have captions and all this sort of stuff. The one you did in preparation of this was excellent. And I thought, how hard did you have to work to get all of that put together? And, you know, I mean, you know, I'll own I'm single. I don't have a significant other. You know, I have to do everything, you know, I mean, and some people say that's better and some people say it's worse. It depends on who you're talking to. You know, I mean, after this, it's going to be 9 o'clock at night, and I'm going to go pick up the grocery delivery because I didn't want to go beforehand because I was going to hit traffic. I didn't want to be late coming back and cause you anxiety. But at 9 o'clock at night is the only time I can get to the place without it being a line. It's -7 degrees Celsius here. It's chilly. So, you know, I would rather stay home, but there's nobody to get the groceries, and I need cat food and some food tomorrow. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's enough work. Video is enough work that good people don't want to do it half-heartedly.
I agree. I've found the barriers to video quite high, and it's taken me a long time to get comfortable with it because I'm an older person, and I don't look like those really young, gorgeous people on YouTube. So consequently, I've had that self-critical barrier to overcome. I also grew up with manual typewriters, so I've been around a while. Technology does not come easy to me, and I am very grateful that now our phones make it so easy. But I'm also very lucky. I've got some very patient team members who will help me go through things, because if I don't do something, if I do something the first time, I may not remember how to do it again if I don't do it with enough regularity. And, you know, I think that's fair on LinkedIn too. There are new features. There are so many new features and changes on LinkedIn. If you don't do something regularly or practice it, you can forget how to do that. And we had an issue with that this morning, me trying to do something and going, well, hang on a minute, I just don't remember how to do that. And it's been a month since I last did it. How do you do that? And so having someone to ask and someone to help, I mean, Google can certainly help in a lot of ways. And LinkedIn help is very good in lots of situations too, I have to say. But there are a lot of changes on LinkedIn, and I don't see that that changing anytime soon. I'm just going to add a comment here on the screen, another one from Antonia. And thank you so much, members of our wonderful audience today who have been contributing comments and giving Diane and I even more things to talk about. And I think what Antonia is saying there is exactly what we've already said, that it's all about the connections and about the depth of relationship that we have. Because you talked about people that you could borrow money from who would take you to the airport. And what was the third thing? There was another one.
Help me move.
Help you move, right? And so there is a next level out of people who might not do that, but they would be prepared to come and meet you and have coffee with you or do something else with you. Oh, this is your graphic. I do hope we're going to see that in the comments.
So this is my change of address announcement. This is all the homes I've had.
Oh my goodness. Well,
so this is why I know the pain of helping me move. I do want to address her comment though, because I do think it is something important, because I will say, as I joke about this helping me move, borrowing money, or,
taking you to the
airport. I do think in some cases it's easy to put expectations. I don't want to say pressure, but expectations on the people who you know the best. And those people will say, well, why aren't you organized that you need a ride to the airport? Why don't you earn more money that you could just take an Uber? I mean, we can feel a lot of criticism from them. Whereas if I went to my second tier and said, can you help me move this? They would just simply be, they can or they can't. There's not the emotional baggage with that. And so I think, to her point, the one reason why it's wise to grow our network is that you do have those rings that go out. Now, when it gets to the point of, the Nigerian prince who's inherited millions of dollars, and you're the only one, of course, that they're calling, is a little bit of a far-fetched. But I do think in some cases, those other people can actually really be very beneficial to you. Whereas the people who know you, whether or not they mean to, you can feel a certain level of criticism or anxiety approaching them. Whereas a quick share is my dad was quite ill, and I had left him at his brother's in Virginia, and I was flying back home, and I was spent. I was very, very tired. And this is before we had any discussions of mental health, and his father and later on that brother had both committed suicide. And so I knew my dad was in a pretty fragile situation, and I get to the airport and I'm just kind of like, a zombie. And I said to the woman, would you mind just watching my bag while I get some water? And she said, how about I get the water and you just stay right there? And I said, okay. And gave her a couple of dollars, and she came back, and I just like, bleh, just spilled everything, and I'm crying in the whole 9 yards. And she said, I work at the University of Virginia Medical Center. How about I see if we can get your dad some treatment?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And the next day, and so I called my uncle that night, and he was like, I'm afraid, your dad will be a medical experiment. And he was a little bit of a character. And then a few days later, they said, he's at the medical center. And thank you so much for making that possible. And her name is in some phone book, a piece of paper in my mess, but I will forever be incredibly appreciative to that stranger who was not in, this was well before LinkedIn, who just expressed some kindness. And so I think, to her point, whether it's an intentional network or whether it's just being kind to anybody and everybody at that moment, whenever you have a moment to be kind, be kind.
Be kind. That's a second great message from today's live. Diane, there was tell me earlier, and now be kind. I'm a great believer in that too. Of course, we had a prime minister who throughout COVID, whose main message was be kind. And so
she was the commencement address at Harvard, actually.
Oh, right. Okay. So I think that LinkedIn is one of the very few online platforms where people are kind, where like attracts like. And if you give and share and contribute, then other people that come into your orbit will also be people who contribute, share, and educate you and give you lots of really good information. So to me, it is a very benign platform. I know not everybody here feels exactly the same, but the people that I attract are exactly those sorts of people. People, if they said to me, Lynnaire, could you please take me to the airport? They're the kind of people that I would say, certainly. What time do you need to be there? And I like to think that I have quite a number of people in my network who would do the same for me should the need ever arise. And to me, that is really what LinkedIn is all about and what networking is all about. And I'm just going to, while we wrap up here, I'm just going to put this on the screen from Emo, because I think that it's really important to recognize that you were lucky with the person that you met at the airport, how generous and kind she was. But for most of us, we don't tend to be terribly trustworthy or trusting immediately. It takes time to build that trust. And how we do that on LinkedIn, I think, is really important, which is probably slowly, a bit at a time, just as you would build a friendship with somebody in the real world.
And can I add something to that, though? I think it's true. I also think we too often think our hints are going to let people know what we need.
Right.
And so I just did this, unvarnished, this is happening. And she saw a need and she had a solution. We don't often say to somebody, I've left my wallet at home. I need $2 for the bus fare. I live here. I'll meet you tonight and I'll get you the money back. I mean, we don't ask, we hint.
Hmm.
And so I think one time I was giving a talk in Dallas and I said, I do an exercise about, is it a match? How can we find a match? And so this person, I said, who needs help? Let's find a match. And she said, I'm looking for a job. And people kind of just like, nobody knew what to say. And another woman, she said, can I ask something that's not work related? I said, sure. And she goes, I really need a gold bag for a black tie on Saturday night. And a bunch of people raise their hands. Now I jokingly say we were in Dallas. And so they all have black ties because they go to events there. She was specific. So what is your gold bag, black tie, Saturday night? Because if you ask with some specificity and you ask with some guidelines, I have a gold bag that was my grandmother's and I'll never loan it out. I just won't because it'll get beer, wine, lost, forgotten. It's not something I'm going to loan out. And it's really not that interesting of a bag and it's old and doesn't even hold a phone. So it's kind of like not useful. It's when bags were like little, matchbooks back and they could hold a lipstick and that was about it. So
but
I think
what you're saying is important, though, is you have to have boundaries around what we're talking about here, I think. And you've been very clear around what you will and won't do when it comes to gold bags.
Well, but I also think that, if somebody says, oh, I'm going to a party this weekend, and I'm like, I'm not going to think, do you need anything? So I think, and so I think that, people will be as helpful and kind if they kind of know what it is. And another time I did this exercise and this woman said, well, this is an off the wall one, but I could use a ride home. I can take the subway, but it's always nicer when you're not on the subway. And we have a very safe subway and she was heading to a very safe neighborhood. And someone said, what's the neighborhood in Newton and, what town? And she goes, oh my God, you live around the corner from me. So, but we're not going to think she needs a ride home, So we have to be willing to ask, and that's very vulnerable.
Yes. And it's hard to do that. Definitely. No question. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and as usual, I've gone well over time because you told some fabulous stories today, which has been really instrumental in helping get the message across, I think, Diane, because it's all very well to sit here and talk about facts and figures, and LinkedIn has this feature and it'll allow you to do that and X, Y, and Z. But people will remember you much more when you tell a story that resonates with them. Right. And whether that's the lady at the airport or that 98-year-old man or how you and I ended up being on this event today, people will go away by remembering the stories and therefore the messages that that you've shared with us today. So apart from be kind and tell me, what is the other most important thing that you've shared with us today that you think people need to remember when they are reaching out to people, building their relationships with people, and networking generally?
Ask them what they need. Say to somebody, what's on your mind? Another quick thing, I did this at a faculty meeting at Johnston in Wales, that beautiful school in Rhode Island. And this man said, my wife said to me as I left the house, when are you selling your mother's car? She's in heaven. We need to get rid of her car. And somebody else said, does it run? And he says, yeah, it's run. My mother took great care of it. Is it ugly? Yeah, sold. My daughter now has a car. And so they bought and sold a car at a faculty meeting. You, again, ask and share. Ask
and share. Fabulous final story for us to end on. Diane, thank you for sharing all these fabulous ideas and stories with us. And we are going to let you head out into that -7 to make sure that you've got food for your wonderful cat, because it would be very difficult for you to wake up in the morning to hear the noise and not have something to feed him or her. So if anyone's not connected to Diane or not following her, please do reach out. She's easily able to be found on LinkedIn, of all places. Who would have thought that? And the same with me. If you're not connected or following me, please do reach out. Please do make sure that you click the bell on both of our profiles so that you see our posts. You might like to subscribe to newsletters. I've got a newsletter. I've got a company one and a personal one, so double value. So please do subscribe to those as well. Now, we also have our Linkability.biz site. Please pop over there, check that out, because it's a really good way to catch up with the latest on LinkedIn and to find out lots of different ways to be able to unravel the mysteries of LinkedIn, which is what we've been trying to do here today with Diane. So Diane, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Boston.
My pleasure.
It has been fabulous to catch up with you, and I can confidently say that now that we're back in touch, we will be staying in touch again over the next few months and years. I'm perfectly sure about that. Thank you. We'll be back with another LinkedIn Live in March, but before that, we have a LinkedIn audio event here at around the same time next week, and we'll be looking at all the new features that LinkedIn has been delivering to us since we last met in our Linkability audio room. So thank you, Diane. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on our LinkedIn Live today, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.